Welcome to this show today. This session will put more emphasis on how ADHD can be managed with a tool like mindfulness. If you've noticed, there always is that one person in our team or at home who's constantly restless, who is unable to finish sitting down for their entire meeting, for example, or through a training program, and they're terribly bored about it. There could be children who are constantly, incessantly talking on the dinner table and interrupting others. And maybe you're finding that it's just not possible for them to quiet down. Now, while 13% of adults are diagnosed with ADHD every year, there is a lot more people that go undiagnosed. There's a lot more children who go undiagnosed. It is a common occurrence, a neurotypical chemistry that happens in the brain, which causes for ADHD to show up very early in children, mostly during the ages 7 to 12. And if we parents don't catch it in time, it goes undiagnosed, it goes punished in some cases, unfortunately, for children, but also it affects not only their schooling, their studies, and their extracurriculars, but it also brings a bad rap to their reputation as a child. The child is either called clumsy or not careful or not attentive, for all you know. And this goes on until they grow up. And when an adult, the same child will then show recurrence. As adults, symptoms of ADHD will then recur and show up all over again. And so today, the reason for me bringing this topic into Conscious Together is with the simple hope that I will be able to add to the awareness of how mindfulness can radically improve the chemistry in our brain by just sitting down with a 15-minute mindfulness practice, or standing up, may I say. And so today's presentation, or today's session, I have brought a few slides along because there was so much to speak, but I really had to condense it into a few short slides. So here we go. Are you ready to do this with me? So in the first bit, let's talk about what ADHD is and how it shows up in children. Between the ages of 7 and 13, when the neurotransmitters are working in the brain, when we see children's brains developing, there are some critical changes in brain chemistry, and that gives rise to divergent or differently abled individuals. Right? And what it shows up in children is either as inattention or an inability to sit still. They may find it hard to relax. They may find it hard to do nothing. Actually, that may be really hard. They may also find it really difficult to sit down doing quiet activities because their bodies are constantly restless, right? They're unable to wait their turn. They are excessively talking, like they cannot deal with these wide spaces of no noise, right? They're constantly urged to say something or remove that distress of being quiet by adding in something constantly. And now, to add to it, it shows up differently in boys as it shows up in girls. In boys are more fidgeting, they're more externally ADHD'd, they're more externally restless. But with girls, it has been seen in various studies that girls tend to show that restlessness internally. So there could be episodes of overthinking, of suicidal thoughts, of being unhappy, of being worrisome a lot more than is required. And classic overthinking, we would call it. So it is important to note a few things here. With girls and boys, they show different manifestations when it comes to ADHD. They have a special ability to hyper focus. Now, not all ADHD, and again, what I'm doing today is a very generic conceptualization of ADHD for the reason of making a case for mindfulness. However, every case for ADHD will be different and is best seen by a doctor or is best assessed by a psychiatrist. So again, this is just a sign that I would be showing you if you have a child or a parent or an adult who could be showing symptoms of ADHD. Now, again, coming back to this, there are two kinds of ADHD. One where a person is hyperactive, very impulsive, unable to sit still. But the other kind could be where a person shows ADHD simply because they're unable to relax. They are unable to switch tasks. They are unable to switch modes during a task. If they have to cook and then work, then it could be massively difficult for somebody to do that, right? And that is why it's important for someone with ADHD to use the tenets of mindfulness, where they're able to say, okay, this task of cooking is now complete and I now move into a different activity. And for us to do something like this with our children is mighty important, to say that, okay, we've now finished our 20 minutes of math. We're going to shut our book. We're going to take a 2-minute break before we move on to the next bit that we're going to study today, or the next activity. What that allows is for the child to be able to move seamlessly between tasks while being able to bring their attention physically with them to the different steps that they will be conducting. So having said that, it's important to note that ADHD in children looks very different from what ADHD in adults would look. And that is my next slide here now, to say that in adults, ADHD looks like there is a generic low tolerance for frustration. You would see that if there is, if you're waiting in a queue in a supermarket, I mean, that is a conscious together example that we all use, isn't it? Let's stick to that. So if you're at the supermarket queue and you see someone who finds it absolutely difficult to wait for their turn, they're absolutely frustrated and they don't know how to handle that frustration, that is a classic sign, could be a classic sign of ADHD, unless of course they're running and they have a deadline to catch, and so that would be a completely different scenario. And so again, to say that as a disclaimer, these signs are for those of us who are curious about ourselves, but this is not for us to diagnose another person with ADHD. So please be mindful about that. Now, the second thing that shows up for adults in ADHD, emotions like anger, sadness, grief, or even happiness, these could be exaggerated. They just look more angry, they just sound more happy, they just cannot get over the grief simply because their brains are not helping them manage their emotions. Now, managing emotions and executive control, which is organizing and sort of collecting yourselves, these are all functions that belong to the prefrontal cortex in our brains. Now, when it comes to a person with ADHD, the prefrontal cortex has very thin lining and they're not substantially connected well to the amygdala, which is the emotion center. Now, what happens then is the level of restraint then is considerably lower for such individuals, which is why when they have an emotion, it shows up very easily. They do not know how to handle it because the reaction of the emotion, as well as the urge to speak or communicate how that shows up in them, is almost merged. They're not able to separate these two things, and that makes it difficult for them to speak about how they're feeling. They will act their feelings out. And that's why you would say, oh my God, he's so sensitive, or this guy, he's so emotional, she is so angry, she must be having some childhood issues. So these are things that people often generalize and throw under the carpet because they don't know how to deal with this person who is communicating their feelings and feeling their feelings at the same time. Not just that, because of their executive controls, which is also controlled by the prefrontal cortex, they are not able to remember things, or they are not able to manage their responsibilities very clearly. They could be late picking up their children. They could be late signing up for their student-led conferences. They are probably delayed signing up for that field trip that they were so happily talking about. So it is two different things, that they believe that they want to participate in an activity, but then they're unable to keep up with the deadlines because they just find it hard to remember them. They display impulsive urges sometimes. If you've seen people with bags, shopping bags, coming out of stores, which are uncanny, which could be more than what you would normally see, it could be because the person has some ADHD tendencies. The person, again, as an adult too, is unable to relax, also interrupting others because they are just not able to manage the boredom inside their brains. I mean, this is a physiological reason, and really it may not be so much to blame on the other person, but to understand the person as they go through this. Now, a few things come to mind as I'm showing you this slide. Number one is that if you are showing any such symptoms, please definitely go to a mental health care professional. I'm here more from an educational perspective. This is what I've learned during my master's, and this is in no way meant to diagnose or substitute a healthcare visit. So this is something that is important for me to mention here. The other thing is also that as adults, we face a lot of challenges, and with ADHD, like any other malfunction, could I say, with a hint of jest, it is important to realize that it is manageable through medication, through diet and exercise. Mindfulness and tools like mindfulness will definitely help you. But again, this is not something that is scary or that you should fear diagnosing. So please get the help if you need to. If these slides have anything but inspired you, please see a mental health care provider. Now, coming to the part that interests me the most, when it comes to mindfulness, I've seen that a lot of people who have ADHD tendencies, and again, let me clarify, it's not few. All of us could have some, if not all, these symptoms about ADHD that we've spoken, right? Our constant need for dopamine. We are constantly addicted to dopamine, which make it really difficult for us to manage boredom, to manage the restlessness in our body. And that is why we're constantly trying to distract ourselves from what is showing up in our body. And that is one reason why it may be difficult to sit down to meditate for a person with ADHD. However, can I insist that it is very important that a person with ADHD gives mindfulness, gives meditation a thorough shot. There are ways that we can sit down, stand up, walk as we meditate, which we will do a little bit later today. But these are important for you to note as possible ways to become more mindful. Right? So, coming to the challenges of the ADHD mind, what really could go wrong? In my experience, I have seen that some meditators find it really hard to practice focusing on the breath. They find it absolutely impossible to remember to bring their attention back to their breath. This is a very common occurrence. Again, it's like a muscle. The need to bring our attention back to our breath is something that will improve only with practice. Now, people with ADHD diagnosis could find it harder, but my suggestion would be to continue giving it a shot in ways that may be different from a regular meditation, but you must give it a try. And when I go live very soon, you will see there are some practices that you can do to begin meditation. Restlessness in the body or the mind showing up also creates a big challenge for a meditator or a to-be meditator or a want-to-be meditator in the early stages. Now, the one short way to manage this difficulty or challenge would be to try to keep attuned to that restlessness. Oftentimes, like I mentioned before, our energy is spent on running away, escaping from this difficulty, from this restlessness. If you rather had a perspective where you welcomed and you brought loving attention and care to this restlessness and discomfort that shows up, you would see that it critically changes how you see meditation. The other more important thing is when we see that there is a decrease in dopamine, and again, most ADHD cases refer to where dopamine deficiency is difficult to be handled. There is less stimulation also during a meditation practice. There's nothing to do outside of us, it's just sitting, isn't it? So for people with ADHD, they like stimulation. They like not to be bored. They like to jump from one idea to another, which could be a fantastic strength in times. But when you sit down to meditate, that could pose a challenge, certainly. And again, like I said, we'll do some practices which will help you see how you can meditate differently. And I think I have already spoken about the fact that we're trying to escape the discomfort. I would like to restate it because it is quite hard in the initial stages to sit still. But again, it is like you strengthen a muscle. If you continually inform your body and mind, saying, no matter what happens for the next 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm going to try and remain in this position if I do. Oftentimes, we also see people falling asleep when they're practicing meditation. And I just want to make it clear that it's absolutely okay for people to fall asleep. That is probably what their body and their mind really requires. But it would impede with the practice of mindfulness. So if you have a regular time that you can set aside every morning at 6 a.m. for 10 minutes, for example, or the night at 10 p.m. every night for 10 minutes, that is far more possible to help you get into a habit of meditation and mindfulness. Right, so now that we've spoken about why it's difficult to sit still or meditate, let's find out why it is important to even be mindful and do a practice around mindfulness, right? So, the first thing and the most critical thing is neurochemically, by sitting down in meditation, the prefrontal cortex was thickened due to meditation. Because once we get into this alpha state, it brings neurotransmitters, it helps the gray cells thicken, and it will help you manage your emotion better. It will also help the executive function better. So, memory is solidified, your organizing skills are solidified, you now remember birthdays and anniversaries better. So, definitely a good reason to try mindfulness. It also decreases mind wandering. Now, this is a term that I haven't used before in our session today, but mind wandering is a state where, imagine you're doing nothing right now. Even when you're not busy with anything physically, there is still a lot of activity going around in your mind. When it's not particularly thinking of any one thing, the mind is set to wander. It could wander to a vacation in Greece. It could wander to that school that you went to. It could wander to whatever else. I mean, there's plenty that our mind wanders into, which is what the mind is supposed to do. However, with meditation, we are able to give the mind sort of a job to do, to say, okay, let's just bring our attention back to our breath all the time. And what that does is it reduces worrying, overthinking, and rumination. For patients, especially with trauma, ADHD, or bipolar disorder, it has been seen that overthinking and rumination has the ability to create stress that could lead to further deterioration in health. Hence, it is important that by the practice of mindfulness that you're able to manage the overthinking and rumination. And this is one way to do it. The third thing, of course, is here, like I said, it decreases the urge to act while keeping in mind an observer mode. I've just spoken about it. It reduces impulses and urges, which is critical to say, okay, now I can see that my mind wants to get up and bring that glass of water. But can it stay for the next 1 minute, because I'm going to finish my meditation by then. So it is to say that you're able to look, watch, observe your urges and impulses, and then make a very solid choice whether you want to give in to the urge or not. And so it doesn't become one where you're in an automatic pilot, agreeing to everything that your mind wants you to do, but you're able to see, the mind is now saying it's tired. There is a thought that is coming up, that it is tired, that there is exhaustion. Right? So you're able to observe it and then make the best choice in the best situation about how you want to handle it. And the final, and this is something that I should put the research links and sources here as well, and that is something I will leave at the end of the video, but it has been seen that it increases activity in the left prefrontal cortex. Now, the left prefrontal cortex determines how happy we are. That is our happiness site. And the right prefrontal cortex is one which is active when we are sad or depressed. So when we're able to meditate, it has been shown that the activity in the left prefrontal cortex increases substantially. What that does is it increases the happiness neurotransmitter in our brains, and it reduces the activity in the right side of the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for sadness or for negative emotion. And hence hence the balance of the happiness that we're looking for in terms of a dopamine hit comes more naturally, more organically through the left prefrontal cortex being activated, and a surge of the happiness hormone serotonin coming in. And this is important because we're normally looking for happiness in things outside. We could be buying clothes, we could be buying candies, we could be buying toys for our kids. But really what has the capacity to make us happy lies within us. So being able to watch our thoughts, being able to watch these sensations in our body has the same effect. And you wouldn't have a big credit card bill or a house filled with things. You can live a minimalistic life with being able to manage your consumeristic tendencies by becoming more mindful with the practice of mindfulness. With that said, thank you for sticking with me for the last 20 odd minutes. This is the final summary. So I think it's important to say that diet and exercise are critical for grounding us. They help people with ADHD flag safety and predictability, which are key ingredients in managing ADHD symptoms. Mindfulness brings down mind wandering and impulses and the impulse to act on urges. Mindfulness practices decrease the self-judgment that could arise from ADHD behaviors. We become judgmental about ourselves when we are called clumsy or forgetful. We start calling ourselves that. But simply knowing the fact that we have been diagnosed with something like an ADHD gives us the fortitude and strength to say this is what it looks like to an outsider, but I don't have to be so difficult and hard on myself. So it gives you a cushion from self-judgment. Again, this is a very important point I'd like to finish off the session with. Meditation is a tool that supports ADHD symptoms and helps you manage it better, but it is not a substitute for medication at all. This will differ case by case, and again, this session today was to critically show how important mindfulness is, but it doesn't really undermine the importance and effectiveness of medication and following that routine with your doctor, with the psychiatrist. So please keep these in balance and see this in the context of information that will help you both ways. I hope you enjoyed the session. I enjoyed sharing this information with you, and I hope you like the format that I'm sharing this with you today. I've technically made some differences alongside my son, so I'm super happy today. I'm able to speak well while having my slides with me, so I hope you like the format. Please share, like, subscribe if you like this video, and make sure you join the session we're going live in about 3 minutes or so that you can join us for the exercises which are ADHD appropriate. So thank you again, and you have a lovely week ahead.